New York at night is a river of light that forgets to sleep. Under the bridge by the East River, I learned to count the current by sound. Taxi tires, sirens that never apologize, shoes that never slow down. My name is Lina Harper. At 22, I owned a backpack, a photograph, and a stubborn kind of hope. The photo is my mother, Dr. Evelyn Harper, smiling in a hospital corridor before the day medicine put a price on. Breathing. Hope is the soft part. You hide when the world gets sharp. It was raining. The kind of rain that writes its alphabet on windows and forgets to stop. I stood under the bridge and watched a black Mercedes pull up to the curb. A man stepped out with the weather of urgency around him. Tall, clean lines. A voice that handled 3 phone calls at once to Ethan Crowell. I had seen his name on buildings and in headlines. He looked like the city would move for him if he asked. He didn't see the thing that slipped from his coat and fell to the street. A wallet. Black leather. Initials pressed into the corner. It lay there in a halo of streetlight and rain. People stepped around it. Some stared. Some didn't. I moved before I could think about it. I picked it up. It was heavy with the weight money has when it forgets what it is for. Inside were crisp bills, a metal card, and a small photograph. A little girl holding a paper crane. Her smile was the kind that climbs a staircase and opens a door. I could have disappeared into the night and eaten for a month. Instead, I whispered to no one, to the bridge, to the rain. You dropped something. Sir. He was gone, but his name was stamped in steel and ink, so I walked 6 miles through the rain to Northbridge Tower, to a lobby that smelled like eucalyptus and wealth, security. Didn't see me until I spoke. Tell Mr. Crowell that someone poor found what money can't buy. That is how the story began. With rain, with a wallet, with a sentence that sounded braver than I felt. They put me in a waiting room where even the silence looked expensive. A receptionist offered a towel and a cup of water. I held the wallet like it might shatter if I blinked too fast. A door opened. Walked in with an assistant and 2 other people who were made of schedules. He looked at me the way a person looks at a problem right before they solve it. You asked for me, and he said, I found this. I answered. I placed the wallet on the table between us like it was sacred. He opened it, counted without counting, paused at the photograph. Nothing's missing, he said. Except time, I said softly. Yours, I'm sorry. He studied me, wet hair, faded hoodie, a backpack that knew how to wait. Why bring it back? He asked. Because losing things changes people. Because my mother once told me that returning is a kind of prayer. Because hunger is loud, but dignity is louder. I said, because I know what loss costs. And I'm very tired of paying. He offered me money. I thanked him and shook my head. He offered food. I said yes, because hunger is honest. On the way out, I gave half to the guard downstairs. The guard said nothing, but his eyes warmed a degree. When I left, I didn't think about the wallet anymore. I didn't think about Ethan Crowell. Thought about dry socks. I thought about the next long night and how to make it small. He opened the wallet again when I was gone. He found something I hadn't seen. Behind, the photo of the little girl was a folded paper, thin with years. A hospital receipt, 8 years old. Signed by Dr. Evelyn Harper. My mother's name. That is how the story reached back and touched me with a hand made of memory. I didn't intend to see him again, but the next morning, he came to me first. The shelter where I sometimes slept was more rumor than address. Cots lined up like quiet. Questions, a coffee urn that forgave many sins. I was serving oatmeal I couldn't eat yet. He stood at the doorway like daylight had followed him inside. The room turned to look and then turned back because hunger doesn't pause for Curiosity, Miss Harper, he said. No one had called me that in a long time. He held out the receipt like it was proof of kindness. Your mother, he asked. Was she? She is my mother, I said, even if the state prefers the past tense for the poor. He nodded. He didn't flinch at the tone grief wears when it grows calluses. My wife delivered early, he said. A lifetime ago. The doctor's name on the chart was Evelyn Harper. The baby lived because of her, I closed my eyes and saw my mother's hands. Sure. Gentle. Certain. Like the morning. I saw her leave the hospital office with her jaw set and her eyes on fire. She lost her license, I said. She signed off on treating a patient who couldn't prove insurance. She did it anyway. Administration called it a policy violation. She called it medicine. He was silent. A silence that wasn't empty. A silence that knew how to listen. What happened to her? He asked. Multiple sclerosis, I said. The word felt clinical and cruel in the same breath. We ran out of money before. We ran out of love. He looked at the receipt. Again, like it might tell him where to put his hands. Come, work for me, he said. I laughed without sound. Doing what? I'm good at waiting in lines and apologizing to strangers who won't look up. Observation, he said. Translation. Tell me what people see when they can't afford walls. Tell me what my company looks like from the ground. I wanted to say no because no is safe when yes has teeth. But my mother had taught me to accept the right hand when it reaches down with respect. All right, I said. On one condition. He tilted his head. You call the guard downstairs by his name. It's Elijah. He smiled. Deal. That is how I walked into Northbridge Technologies with wet sneakers and a promise I did not understand yet. The tower had its own weather. In some hallways it rained urgency. In others the air was thin with ambition. I learned to walk between systems without losing myself. I was not hired to code. I was hired to notice. So I noticed. I sat in the lobby for an hour and counted the people security waved through by reflex and the people security questioned by posture. I learned that a backpack looks heavier on some shoulders than on others. I learned that a smile is a passport until it isn't. I watched how the turnstiles blinked green for titles and yellow for temp badges and red for anyone who hesitated. I stood in the cafeteria line and watched who paid for whom and who pretended they hadn't seen. I tracked the way managers apologized to their plates when their phones pulled them away. I learned the names of the night crew before I learned. The names on the glass doors. Elijah at the desk. Marta, who keeps the elevators from sulking. Jay, who knows which light flickers on 37 and which vent sings on 12. A receptionist covered bruises with foundation and a smile she'd learned on television. A junior engineer slept under her desk twice a week because her roommate's boyfriend had opinions about space. A cleaner skipped lunch to buy his daughter sneakers with stars. I wrote it all down, in the same notebook that used to hold prayers and bus schedules. At the end of the week, I gave the notebook to Ethan. He read it the way some people read sacred texts. Slowly.
This isn't a report.
Twice.
It's a mirror.
With questions. This isn't a report, he said. No, I answered. It's a mirror. He didn't call it charity. He didn't call me clever. He called the CFO and the head of HR and said, build policy that respects what this reveals. Build a budget around it, not a press release. The CFO, Richard, smiled very politely and wrote down nothing. His pen hovered like a helicopter that didn't plan to land. HR nodded the nod of, we'll look into it. I kept writing. I learned that a company hums in one key until someone shows up with a tuning fork. Sometimes the fork is kindness. Sometimes it is consequence.
Definitely.
He took me into meetings where the air was expensive. I didn't speak. I listened. I watched Ethan choose words like tools. I watched him remove bolts of confusion without stripping the thread of respect. Afterward, he asked me, what did you see? I said, you speak fluent outcome. but many people in that room are trying to speak worth. It sounds similar until it doesn't. He smiled, and for a moment, the tower felt like it might learn to breathe. Breathing starts in the lungs you ignore. We piloted 3 small things on 3 ordinary floors, the kind you forget exist unless the printer jams. Safe leave, 1 page. For the receptionist with the practiced smile. We wrote a policy on a single sheet, front only, large font. If you need to leave for your safety or the safety of someone you love, you can go. No questions now. We'll do paperwork later when you're ready. Your job will be here. We posted it in places mirrors live, bathrooms, elevator lobbies, next to a number that roots to a live human, not a hold music hymn. HR worried about precedent. Ethan said, exactly. Emergency nights no shame, for the engineer sleeping under her desk. We made 5 studio rooms available in the nearby business hotel. Prepaid, first come, first safe, no manager signature required. We called it Project Pillow, because humor keeps humiliation away. Facilities worried it would be abused. We piloted a month. It wasn't. Stars Fund, tiny and immediate. For the cleaner with the lunch that kept turning into laces. A $200 micro-grant line item per shift supervisor. No form longer than your hand. For life things that can't wait until payday. Finance asked for receipts. We said yes. Receipts or a sentence, whichever the person had time to bring. Richard called these soft costs. I called them breathing costs. When the month ended, absenteeism was down on those floors, after hours. Badge swipes dropped by 1/3, and escalations to HR fell to almost 0. Richard underlined the numbers twice and said, interesting. In finance, interesting is the sound of a door unlocking. I kept noticing. At 7:40 a.m., a line formed at the security gate. Anyone arriving after 7:45 scanned twice, once for permission and once for penance. The scanner beeped louder when it was late. I asked Elijah how often the beeping became a warning. Every day, he said. Mornings are brittle. We changed the ritual. We moved the scanner to a side of the desk where the sound doesn't feel like a gavel. We added grace bands. A 5-minute window with no noise, no scolding emails. Just a green light that says we know the trains don't love you back. We measured productivity. It didn't fall. Panic fell. People stopped arriving already guilty. In meeting room Vega, where deals go to sweat, chairs faced the screen like pews at a cold church. I asked facilities for a triangle of space. 3 chairs angled toward each other and not toward the slides. We called it the conversation corner. The first time we used it, the argument cooled just by changing where knees pointed. Rooms decide outcomes when we let them. I added a column called Interrupted Hours. Time employees lost to policies that were meant to keep the building safe, and instead kept people small. It included escalation loops that repeated like a bad chorus, duplicate approvals that made dignity wait, and compliance pop-ups that appeared at the worst possible moment, then bragged about it. We found 41 hours a week of time we were squandering on friction. Richard tapped the cell with his pen and didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. The finance version of shock. Where did you put the recovered hours? He asked. We spent them on breathing, I said, and on work that actually ships. We wrote a rule. If a control interrupts more work than it protects, fix the control, not the person. Audit didn't argue. Audit is tired too. The night crew taught me about praise. On day shift, applause is a slack emoji. On nights, praise is a cart that rolls easy. I asked maintenance what it would take to make their worst cart glide like a violin case. Ball bearings and permission, they said. We bought better wheels. We taped a note under each cart. If I squeak, I tattle. Lube me. Squeak stopped. Complaints dropped. A cart is not a hill to die on. It is a breath you either waste or save 100 times a night. Breathing is cumulative. We renamed incident reports to repair requests because words carry weights. People submitted more after the rename. Turns out no one wants to file an incident about themselves. Everyone will ask for a repair for the room they share. We added 2 chair corners to every floor, 2 chairs angled, not facing a screen, with a small sign. Use me to rescue a conversation from your inbox. The sign had a cartoon of a rope being thrown. Facilities rolled their eyes. Then they rolled the chairs. People started solving problems before they had to write emails about them. We created quiet escalation, a way to get help without publicly losing. A short link, a short form, a short window before someone shows up. We trained leads to arrive with only 2 questions. What do you need right now? And what can wait? We trained them to leave with only 1 sentence. Here's what I'm doing. Here's when I'll report back. You'd be surprised how much conflict is just the absence of a timestamp. One afternoon, Ethan asked if I wanted to sit in on vendor day, 20 minutes each with 10 companies that promised to fix things that weren't broken yet. The first vendor sold time tracking with a tagline that sounded like a sigh. We'll tell you who's working. I asked who tells them why someone isn't. The rep blinked and pitched geofencing. I asked if their product could recognize when a person takes an extra 5 minutes because the subway coughed, and whether the system would stack those 5 minutes into a case. He said, policy is up to you, which is how products excuse themselves from ethics. We passed. The second vendor sold wellness in boxes, smoothies for morale, yoga for burnout, branded blankets for fatigue. Do you measure interruptions? I asked. Do you reduce involuntary after hours? The rep changed slides. We passed gently. The third vendor sold lighting. Circadian friendly, he said. I asked for a sunrise schedule for the night crew and a blue light quiet hour for coders at 2 a.m. He brightened. That we can do. Not all fixes are moral philosophy. Some are bulbs that dim on time. You can tell when a building begins to breathe by how it says no. Before, no sounded like a policy printout and a closed door. After, no sounded like, not like this, not today. Try me Wednesday at 9. And here is a person who can say yes to part of it now. We trained frontline no to come with an alternate path, an explanation that fits in a mouth, and a promise we could keep. No stopped being a wall. It became a hinge. We tried something silly and it worked. Thank you rounds. Once a week, a VP leaves their floor with a stack of blank cards and comes back with none. The rule is 3 sentences only. What I saw, why it mattered, what it changed. People started pinning the cards near their screens like small shields against the next hard day. Gratitude is cheaper than a banner and harder than a slogan. It also teaches the VP's eyes a new verb. We added meeting nutrition labels to calendar invites, purpose, inputs, decisions, who can leave after 10 minutes without penalty. People laughed. Then they used them. Meetings got shorter. The tower learned to exhale. The day I knew the lungs were bigger was a Thursday. A storm snarled the trains. Grace bands went neon. The turnstiles blinked green like forgiveness. On 21, a manager began the daily stand-up with, "Who had a rough commute?" Hands went up. "Okay," she said. "We'll swap tasks for people who need quiet." On 5, a finance analyst put away a slide deck and picked up a phone to call a vendor to apologize for a past due, because the apology should come from the person, not the portal. On 33, Marta paused an elevator to wait for a man who shuffled with a cane. She smiled into the camera. Somewhere, a security guard grinned back. At lunch, the cleaner with the Star Sneaker's daughter came by the cafeteria door to find me. He lifted his phone to show a photo. A little girl jumping so high you could count the stitches on the stars. "She says they make her faster," he said. She beat her own mile. I wrote faster in my notebook and underlined it twice, because sometimes velocity is the right prayer. Toward the end of the quarter, Richard asked for a roll-up. He wanted metrics that behaved in a board deck. I brought him 4, interrupted hours reduced by policy repairs. Quiet escalations resolved within promised window. After hours, badge drops on pilot floors. Helpfulness index. 1 question, 5 faces. Did someone make your day easier? He stared at the last one. "Is this soft?" "It's steel," I said. "Soft is how it feels. Steel is how it holds." He ran the correlations. Incidents down, attrition down, Cycle time down. Sick days stabilized. He didn't say interesting. He said, let's do 5 more floors. Ethan read the summary and wrote only 2 words in the margin. Keep breathing. I used to think companies change when a leader makes a speech. Now I think companies change when 1,000 small doors stop sticking, when the cart rolls, when the scanner stops scolding, when a rule fits in a mouth, when a room turns its chairs toward people and not only toward slides. We didn't fix everything. We missed emails. We used the wrong word and had to practice a better one. We failed small and often, but the tower was learning a new weather, kind pressure, quiet consequence, reusable dignity. And in the evenings, when the city lit itself like a second sky, I would walk past the lobby and watch Elijah tilt the scanner so it didn't glare at anyone's face. He caught my eye. Feels lighter, he said. It's the air, I answered. Or the doors, he said. Same thing, I told him, and for a moment, the tower truly breathed. The city loves a simple story, a billionaire, a homeless girl. It writes itself if you don't ask for nuance. It started with a grainy photo taken from the mezzanine of a food hall, our faces tilted toward each other in the forgiving light of a soda machine. The caption called me a stunt when the truth was work. A second post stitched the first like bad surgery. A third post added a headline with teeth, and the kind of confidence only strangers have. 3 blogs later, my name became a rumor with feet. My phone, a thrift store rectangle that still believed in patience, grew hot in my hand. Mentions multiplied like fast weeds. Opportunist, grift, crisis actor, then the softer needles. Poor thing, broken bird, pity hire. The internet spoke in the language of speed, and speed doesn't take a breath long enough to ask, what actually happened? Inside Northbridge Technologies, the air changed pressure. The CFO, Richard Valen, called it unfortunate optics. He said the market has allergies. Kindness makes it sneeze. And recommended distance. Signature risk, he called me, the way you label a box you're about to store out of sight. He suggested Ethan move carefully. He used verbs like insulate and mitigate. He pronounced reputational like a diagnosis. No one survives. Ethan said 6 words I'd never heard in a boardroom. Bring me evidence. Not smoke. The board scheduled an emergency call. The email sounded like velvet and knives. Expedited agenda, fiduciary duty, risk perimeter, media containment. When the call began, I listened from a conference room named after a constellation. The stars on the wall looked expensive and tired. They asked if I was qualified. They asked if I was a liability. They asked if Northbridge could afford my reflection. I wanted to disappear because disappearing felt like the safest way to protect the good we were trying to build. So I left my notebook on Ethan's desk. On the last page I wrote, "When kindness costs you your image, you learn what it's worth." Then I walked out into a night that pretended to be cold and was actually just honest. I went to a clinic where the chairs are tired and the lights are brave. I gave blood, for antibiotics for someone else, because somebody had done it for me once. I watched the bag fill with the color of second chances, and thought about how a rumor can feel like a thief and still be just weather. Weather passes. Work remains. By morning, a nurse recognized my photograph from the contact if seen bulletin that security sent to lobbies when someone needed to find me without making a spectacle. She called the number. Ethan arrived with a look that had been awake too many hours. He stood at my corner and did not make a speech. He sat. He said, "You left a note." "I thought you'd need it more than me," I told him. "It's your company. Your reputation." He shook his head. "It's our work." Behind us, the internet kept shouting in the language of speed. Inside the tower, something else, quieter, heavier, was happening. IT traced the leak, a burner account that moved like a borrowed shadow. The CISO followed metadata crumbs through a dozen throwaway IPs to a co-working suite you could rent by the hour and fill with regret. Legal pulled calendars. HR pulled door logs. Security pulled footage no one remembered noticing. A junior project coordinator, 23, smart rent-fragile, had been flattered by a private equity scout into believing she was a whisper, away from a real role, closer to the money. The scout had bought her long lunches with loud compliments and promises of a title that sounded taller than the truth. He asked innocent questions about Ethan's new initiative and whether the optics hurdle had contingency plans. Then he asked a not-so-innocent question. Did Lina have access to procurement? If yes, how fast could she recommend a mission-aligned vendor? The coordinator didn't sell anything. She slid. She forwarded a meeting agenda without the attachments. She took a screenshot of a calendar block and texted it with she wrote, "It's chaos there. CEO's pet." The scout did the rest, cropped, captioned, poisoned the well, called it journalism without paying the toll of accuracy. When we confronted her, she cried the kind of sorry that comes from a long road of almosts. She'd been sending venting DMs. He harvested them like a farmer who doesn't care what he plants. HR followed policy. Legal followed law. And Ethan did something rare in buildings that breathe stock tickers. He walked down to the coordinator's desk, asked everyone nearby for 5 minutes of grace, and sat with her like a person. No theatrics. No perp walk. Just quiet questions and a box for personal things. The difference between consequence and humiliation is a door with dignity on it. Then Ethan stood in front of a camera and said 10 words. We do not outsource truth to rumor or convenience. He didn't dress the sentence in adjectives. He didn't call me exceptional or poor or saved. He talked about procedures, audit logs, chain of custody, how evidence is slower than outrage because evidence has to stand up in the morning. He promised to publish the timeline of the leak, not the name of the staffer, not the emails, the timeline. Process is a lantern when the room wants matches. The stock fell. Then it breathed. Then it remembered results. But in between fall and breath, there is a sound you don't forget. The building holding itself still. Receptionists stopped scrolling and started greeting. Engineers closed Slack and opened the code. The night crew polished brass like it could reflect the truth back at our faces. The comments kept coming. Knife gifts wrapped in empathy. She's just a narrative device. He's laundering guilt with philanthropy. PR cosplay. A blogger with a talent for outrage claimed to have sources, the way a child claims to have a dragon. We responded with receipts, meeting minutes, public filings, the contract for the third-party auditor we hired before the rumor. The blogger moved on. Rumor needs new sugar. We fed it fiber. Later that week, the board met again. The tone softened by 3 degrees. The way voices change when they realize numbers didn't collapse for failing to applaud a lie. One director asked Ethan if he'd considered media training. He smiled the smile he uses when he wants to be kind to an unhelpful idea. I'm training the media, he said, to expect evidence from us. I slept in a real bed that night, in a room that smelled like clean sheets and second chances. I put the notebook back in my backpack. I kept writing. The next morning, a security guard, Elijah, the one who taught me which elevator doesn't bite, stopped me at the turnstile and slid a folded paper my way. It was a page torn from a pocket Bible, the margins filled. Rumor is a rumor because it's afraid to take the stand. He winked. Heard you like receipts. In the cafeteria, a barista wrote, "Keep going" in foam and pretended it was accidental. On the manufacturing floor, a supervisor taped a sign above the scanner. Scan facts, not people. In the stairwell, someone chalked a line on the concrete. Slow is also a speed. The graffiti cleaner left it for a day before erasing it. Everyone deserves a little graffiti that tells the truth. By the end of the week, legal had sent a letter to the scouts firm that did not shout. It instructed. HR had hosted a brown bag titled, How Not to Be Flattered into a Bad Decision. The CISO published a plain English guide to screenshots and consent that fit on a single page. And Ethan sent a company-wide note that ended with, "We build in public. We correct in public. We protect in private." Not everyone applauded. The market still twitched whenever a headline coughed. Richard Valen still CC'd me on emails with subject lines like RE, reputation buffer, and Q2 risk containment, as if I were a spreadsheet that needed a better formula. But the building had learned something the internet hasn't. Truth is heavy and therefore hard to steal. On Sunday, I walked past the river to the bench that will later hold my mother's name and thought about telling the difference between a story and a verdict. Stories have room to breathe. Verdicts don't. I refused to let a verdict be pronounced by strangers who had never tasted our work. I looked up and saw Ethan across the street, hands in pockets, the posture of someone who expects to earn the next minute. He crossed without rushing, sat without asking, and said the one thing leaders forget to say when the noise is loud. "Are you okay?" "I am now," I said. Behind us, a jogger stopped to retie a shoe. Ahead of us, a bus exhaled at a stop. Above us, the skyline practiced balance. And in my lap, the notebook lay open to a new page. The rumor had spent its appetite. The city moved on to its next sugar. We were still here, doing the work that doesn't trend because it doesn't need to. I slept. He didn't gloat. The company remembered its spine. And the next morning, I started learning how to turn grief into plumbing. Because justice, I would soon discover, is not a flood. It's a diagram. I kept building. He kept counting. And somewhere between those two habits, the truth learned to stand without wobbling. A month after the rain, he asked me to meet him in the small conference room with the quiet view, the one with a window that frames just enough skyline to make your breath behave. He set the wallet on the table between us. The same leather, the same initials in the corner, but inside, something new. A card, cream paper, raised lettering. The Harper Open Care Foundation, healthcare without walls. My breath found the edge of a rib and stayed there. "You built this?" I asked. "We did," he said. "You gave me the blueprint." He told me about clinics with soft light and straightforward forms. About mobile vans that bring medicine to doorsteps pride won't cross. About doctors who rotate through as if mercy were continuing education. About a fund that pays for equipment without making families sign their last name away. "Your mother's signature taught me the cost of policy when policy forgets people," he said, tapping the card. "Her receipt sat in my wallet for 8 years. It felt like a debt. I'd like to pay some of it." I cried quietly because loud crying is for later. He slid a second paper across the table. "An offer, not charity. Director of Operations for the Foundation. A salary that felt like a room with windows. Benefits that recognized a human is not a spreadsheet." "I don't know enough," I said, even though my hands were already drawing floor plans in the air. "You know where the cracks are," he answered, "and you know how to listen to people standing in them. We'll hire the rest. Justice is not a flood. It is a plumbing diagram. You follow where the water should flow, then you fix it when it doesn't." I said yes, because saying no would have been fear pretending to be humility. Week 1 looked like a legal pad married to a map. Governance, compliance, budget, privacy, procurement, staffing, translation, transportation, trust. We formed a firewall between the foundation and Northbridge's vendor decisions, so no one could accuse us of laundering goodwill into contracts. We filed the paperwork that turns intent into structure. We found a bank that understood wires at midnight, and a landlord who knew how to listen. Site 1 was a church basement that smelled like bread and hymnals. We rolled in fresh paint and rolled out the pews, then laid linoleum that forgave scuffs. We hung signs written at a 4th grade reading level in 4 languages. We chose chairs that don't punish waiting and lamps that don't hum like a threat. We put a children's corner in sight of check-in so a parent's eyes could love and sign at the same time. Site 2 was an old tire shop that remembered noise. We power washed the black dust out of its bones, kept the roll-up door for summer air, and built a consultation room where an engine lift once held its breath. The neighbor who owns a taqueria brought lunch the first day and refused payment. "Pay me by staying," she said. We did. Site 3 was the back room of a library where the children learn alphabet and the elders learn blood pressure in the same hour. The librarian, a quiet revolutionary with a cardigan like a banner, declared fines forgiven for anyone who brought in a lab result. "A receipt for reading," she said. We added a shelf labeled, "Ask me how to fill this," tax forms, school forms, medical forms with the sharp corners sanded down. We hired a team that made policy blush with pride, a nurse who speaks 5 languages with her eyes. On day 3, she knelt to a child's height, showed a blood pressure cuff to a stuffed dinosaur first, then to the boy. The dinosaur passed. So did the boy, a clerk who can turn a line into a circle. He numbered tickets with colors instead of digits, then moved quietly through the room asking, "What timeline does your day need?" He once swapped 3 places and a sandwich to make a grandmother's bus doable. That's an operations degree you can't buy, a doctor who said he was tired of practicing medicine and wanted to do it for real. He threw away the 20-minute template like a broken metronome and built his days out of warm handoffs and callbacks. When we asked why he left his prestigious badge, he shrugged. I got better at treatment plans than people. I'd like to reverse that. We wrote "No one owes for mercy received" on the wall and meant it. People came. Then they told other people. And the rooms began to learn their own weather. The way rumor runs colder than fact. The way a diagnosis gets warmer once it's pronounced without shame. The CFO sent me a one-line email. Charity is not strategy. He CC'd Ethan because the sentence wanted an audience. I replied with a calendar invite titled Receipts. When he arrived, a woman handed him tea and the chart of a patient who would have died without policy that bent toward dignity. He did not drink the tea. He did not read the chart. 6 minutes later, he left. Some people measure time in billables. Some people measure time in breaths. I kept building. He kept counting. But even counters change if the numbers stop behaving like enemies. By month 2, we had a skeleton that could stand. Intake reduced to 3 questions. What brought you here? What do you need to leave with? What would make that easier? Navigation that assigns a human, not a leaflet. Pharmacy vouchers that work at night because illness doesn't keep office hours. A 72-hour callback rule with a script that doesn't sound like a script. A dignity ledger where staff record every small rule they bent to help someone and why. We review it monthly to change the rule, not punish the bending. We learned 1,000 small things the hard way. That the form field labeled middle name becomes a border for someone whose culture doesn't use one. That no food or drink signs make sense to floors but not to diabetics. That waiting room TV is a moral choice. We turned it off and put books where noise used to be. That a bathroom key on a chain feels like a handcuff. We replaced it with a door that opens. The vans, white cubes of mercy with gentle lettering, were a different kind of classroom. We mapped apartment clusters where stairs are old and courage is tired. We ran routes by heat index and payday calendar. We stocked the vans with prenatal vitamins, wound care kits, inhalers, glucose strips, condoms, diapers, humor. The driver learned names. The nurse learned dogs. The community learned we were exactly as advertised, present without prying. We installed a data system that behaves like a guest, not a guard. No selling, no surprise emails, no ticking boxes that multiply shame. We tracked what we needed to measure did we help, and what broke, and stopped when curiosity turned into surveillance. By month 3, the foundation had a rhythm. Monday mornings, ops huddle. 3 wins, 3 breaks, 1 wild idea. Wednesdays, listening hour. 1 staff member. 1 hour, door shut. No notes unless they ask for a pen. Fridays. Field rounds. We walk the block and ask the shopkeepers what health looks like this week. Stories became our unit tests. A man who dodged clinics for a decade, because a nurse once said his name wrong, stayed long, enough to learn he didn't have what he feared. He cried with the relief that comes after a decade of armor. A cafeteria worker asked for a blood pressure check and left with a cardiology appointment and a text from a volunteer who would meet her there. A teenager came for a bandage and left with Plan B and a pep talk from a nurse who had practiced that speech in a mirror until it turned into a handshake with herself. When the first bills from suppliers arrived, the CFO's eyebrows wrote a novel. Your per-patient cost is upside down, he said. Our per-crisis cost is disappearing, I answered. Sliding a chart across the table, ER visits down, avoidable admissions down, missed shifts down among every employee household within 5 miles of a site. The graph behaved like a slope choosing kindness. He didn't smile, but the next budget draft arrived with a line called, Bridge items and funds you didn't have to beg for. We made mistakes. We scheduled a women's health night on a religious holiday. We stocked the wrong needles. We forgot to order more blue crayons because every child wants the sky. We apologized. We fixed it. We added a checklist to prevent the kind of forgetting that wears a person out. Justice isn't flawless. It's faithful. By month 4, we built policy like carpentry. Don't be a gate. If your role says approve but your heart says block, trade chairs. Warm handoff or it didn't happen. You don't give a phone number. You place a call and wait for an answer together. Translate intention into instructions. Be respectful turns into, Say their name the way they say it. Ask what help would make this easier. Never point with a pen. We invited the skeptical, the precise, the ones who count pennies because they once had to. We gave them chairs by the door and clipboards with the kind of data that gets quiet when it's wrong. They kept us honest about waste. We kept them honest about cost. Somewhere in those conversations, strategy and charity stopped competing and started trading tools. The first time a patient asked to donate, we said no. We said, pay someone's bus fare today, or buy 2 boxes of diapers the next time you shop and leave them by our door. They did. Mercy scales sideways. We let it. Every month, Ethan came with the old wallet. He thumbed the photo of a little girl and a paper crane. He unfolded the hospital receipt with my mother's name and smoothed it the way you smooth a shirt before an interview. Your mother gave me a rule, he said one evening, watching the van pull away. Don't let policy forget people. We're just building furniture for that rule. On a Tuesday, the taqueria owner brought lunch and a rumor. The competitor's clinic, she said in a hush she didn't need, has rules about laughter in the waiting room. I smiled. We have a policy about laughter, too. She waited. Encouraged. She laughed so loud the blood pressure cuff noticed, and then there was the day that should be a movie but won't be because it doesn't explode. A man in a delivery uniform came in holding his side like a secret. He'd been ignoring the ache because rent is unforgiving and pain has bad timing. Our doctor listened the way mechanics listen to engines and called an ambulance without scaring the room. It was an appendix that wanted to be famous. It did not get the chance. He came back 3 weeks later with a small scar and a big smile, and 2 sacks of oranges because gratitude often arrives in fruit. I kept building. He kept counting. And one afternoon, Richard Valen, the CFO who wrote emails like ice, walked into Site 2 and sat in the waiting room for an hour without telling anyone his last name. He watched the clerk turn lines into circles. He watched a nurse kneel to tie a shoelace for a child braver than his fever. He watched a doctor explain a diagnosis with a metaphor about a garden and weeds. He left without a word and sent me a spreadsheet the next day titled Cost of Kept Promises. The totals lined up like geese. At the bottom, he wrote, Recommend expansion. Justice had crawled into the heart of the counting. Hope had learned to file paperwork without losing its handwriting. Sometimes at closing, I stand in the doorway and listen to the building exhale. The floors remember shoes, the lights dim to the color of rest, the van radios crackle goodnight, and in my mind, I see my mother's signature on that crinkled receipt, ink steady, letters sure, as if she's still signing off on our work, page after page. We opened 3 clinics by winter. People came. Then they told other people. We meant the words on the wall. No one owes for mercy received. I kept building. He kept counting. And the city, slowly, stubbornly, started to breathe like it remembered how. Doing the right thing teaches you who profits from shortcuts. We could have copied the press release our competitor, used 3 paragraphs of efficiencies and partnerships, and a photo of smiling workers standing straighter than fear. But we were building something slower. Something that didn't collapse if anyone asked a second question. First, we let the people closest to the pain hold the flashlight. We didn't recruit translators by resume. We asked crews to nominate the person they already trusted when paychecks came up short, or supervisors forgot the rule book. That's how we found Luz in a canteen behind a dye house in Puebla. She can shift from formal Spanish to kitchen Spanish to grandmother Spanish without losing dignity in any register. Dao, from District 7, learned English from a karaoke book and an aunt who corrected lyrics like grammar. She laughs like a bell and writes everything down, even the laughter. Armin from Dhaka has a gift I can't teach. He knows the difference between yes for survival and yes for truth. We set up interviews in break rooms that smelled like garlic and steam. In shuttle vans between shifts, on concrete steps where heat rose from the day like a second breath, always in their language, always with the promise that nothing said to us would cost anyone a shift. We didn't confiscate phones. We brought portable chargers. We didn't anonymize people into dust. We asked how they wanted to be remembered, by first name, nickname, role, or by the bracelet they made with their daughter on a Sunday. Timelines are where justice often dies. So we set ours to match reality instead of the quarter. When a manager asked for a Friday deadline, we asked who would miss a family meal to make it happen. When a vendor offered a rush fee, we asked what slowed down when we sped up. It cost more. The board breathed into a paper bag. The CFO asked, "How do we model the upside of not cutting corners?" Ethan said, "By counting the corners we keep." Week 3, a rumor drifted across our desks. Our competitors' training centers were dormitories with rules about smiling. Fines for low energy. Cameras trained on beds the way of fear trains on exits. Their savings curdled into subpoenas. Headlines learned a new word, scandal-proof, and attached it to our report, not because we were perfect, but because we published the receipts. Our document didn't read like marketing. It read like work, line by line, site by site, 2 columns, what we saw, what we're changing. We added an appendix of first names and wishes, printed with permission, and a QR code for each site that opened raw audio clips. Workers could tap and hear themselves say, "Yes, that is me. Yes, that is what I said." The internet tried to turn it into a victory lap. We called it what it was, a receipt for promises paid forward. Change rarely arrives with trumpets. It shows up as new habits. We wrote a family days policy on 1 page. If the hospital calls, you go. No guilt. No paperwork that feels like punishment. Time is the benefit. We pay it out. First week, Priya, a receptionist, left mid-morning to sit with her father through a scan. She returned the next day with a box of Mythi and a smile that made the lobby brighter. Jay, a line cook, used 2 hours to see his sister's newborn through a nursery window. David, a security officer, took Friday afternoon to sign custody papers for his nephew. Retention rose. Incident rates fell. Customer satisfaction did something numbers aren't supposed to do. It followed kindness like a tide. Meanwhile, the audit kept moving. In Puebla, Luz's interviews revealed that the attendance bonus was actually a deduction disguised as a prize. Missed 2 morning buses and your month shrank by 1/3. We converted that scheme into guaranteed base pay and paid the difference retroactive to the last quarter. The factory manager asked if we would announce the change at shift change. "No," I said. "You will." He did, and the cheer that followed sounded like metal relaxing. In District 7, Dow mapped the informal network that fixed problems faster than management. An auntie who runs a rice stand and also a daycare. A scooter repairman who sells SIM cards without questions. A seamstress who translates medical forms in exchange for coffee. We hired them all as community liaisons at a monthly retainer and added their names to the vendor list. The legal team panicked. "We can't put Auntie Lan's rice and forms in the ERP." Ethan said, "Then update the ERP." In Dhaka, Armand noticed a pattern the spreadsheets missed. The overtime spike began not with orders, but with rain. Monsoon weeks where flooded roads turned commutes into marathons. "We don't need more hours," he said, tapping a map. "We need more buses at 4 a.m., and we need them to float." We leased 2 high-clearance shuttles, added flood routing, and installed lockers so soaked workers could change before the floor. Output stabilized. Absenteeism dropped. No one wrote a headline about a bus, but families noticed when dinner didn't move to midnight. Back home, the finance team grew louder. "Charity is not strategy," the CFO emailed. I replied with a calendar invite. At the clinic, a nurse set tea down in front of him with a chart. He didn't drink the tea. He didn't read the chart. 6 minutes later, he left. Some people measure time in billables. Some measure it in breaths. We kept building. The competitor issued a statement about isolated issues. We sent another van. The board learned to read a new kind of chart, one that tracks comfort offered and harm prevented. The stock dipped on a Monday. By Friday, it remembered what the street forgets. Durable outlasts, dramatic. In the middle of this work, the phone call came, the one I knew would eventually arrive and still wasn't ready for. The nurse said my mother had a good day. Then a quieter day. Then a day that tasted like jasmine tea and goodbye. Hospice rooms have their own weather. Sunlight learns to land softly. Time widens and narrows like a throat. I sat with her and read the labels on the machines until the machines got less frightening. I told her the wallet story again, how rain can be an accomplice to honesty, how a found thing can find you back. I told her about the clinics, how waiting rooms smell like crayons now, not fear. I told her her receipt became a bridge. Small things paid forward until the path looks like a road. She squeezed my fingers. Loss, she said, breath a thread, is just love that needed a new verb. Then she left like a tide goes. Out, steady, certain, leaving. Shells you can hold to your ear and still hear the ocean. We put a plaque on a bench, next to the clinic where kids draw rainbows on everything. For those who listen before they judge, people sit there and remember how to look at each other. On a Tuesday, I heard 3 languages in a single minute, and none of them were unkind. Ethan came to the bench with the old wallet. The leather is softer now, the kind of soft that means it survived. He set it under the plaque and said, "Proof that loss can find its way home." "You never replaced it?" I asked. "Some things work better after being found," he said. Inside, a smudged receipt for 2 coffees and a pack of gum. A bus transfer from a night he almost didn't go back. A photo of a sister who taught him to keep the umbrella wide, and a sentence on a scrap of notebook paper he had forgotten he'd written. "Don't let scale steal your soul. We kept what mattered." We let the easy things go, and when the auditors closed their binders and the translators cashed their checks, and workers walked back into their lives with their heads unlowered, the bench under me felt like a vow. We will do it the slow way if it's the right way, even when no one is clapping, because justice is not a gavel. It's a door you hold open long enough for someone else to walk through without rushing. A year after the rain, I stood on the same bridge with the same city and felt the difference one door can make when someone opens it and keeps it open. We had 6 clinics and 2 vans the nurses named. Olive and Star, because machines deserve gentle names when they do tender work. Saturday vaccination days ended with stickers that read, "Bravery is a muscle," and Polaroids taped to a wall shaped like a constellation. Every second Thursday we hosted paperwork night, where immigration forms and school registrations met tea and translation at long tables that didn't judge. Our calendar carried names in different scripts, and the whiteboard checkmarks looked like confetti. The budget remembered people before optics, meaning we cut the glossy expo no one missed and funded after-hours childcare everyone used. Northbridge. Technologies, the company that used to forget its own pulse, changed in ways that didn't fit on slides. Receptionists went home at decent hours. Engineers stopped apologizing for leaving to visit parents. Facilities put a bookshelf in the break room. It never stayed full. Security greeted people by name and meant it. A line item appeared in the quarterly report, kept promises. Analysts laughed, then built a model, then stopped laughing because the metric correlated with everything that matters. Retention, safety, quality, joy. We defined kept promises simply. Of the commitments we made to people this quarter, how many did we keep on time in full without making anyone beg? It sounds soft. It behaves like steel. Culture doesn't change because a CEO says a sentence into a microphone. It changes because a supervisor learns a new habit and keeps it for 12 Thursdays. It changes because a badge reader gets reprogrammed so night shift isn't punished for flood detours. It changes because a manager starts every meeting with one question. What did we keep this week? Some answers were tiny. Returned a call. Fixed a squeaky door. Some were not. Hired a refugee. Redesigned a schedule around chemo. The foundation kept multiplying in humble ways. A barber down the block offered free haircuts on report card days. A bakery left day-old bread with a note, "Pay us when you can, or pay someone else first." A high school opened its gym on Thursday nights for stroller laps because new parents need miles and company. We added a call your person table near the clinic exit, a landline and a sign, "Use me." No questions asked. People did. "I'm okay. I'm on my way." They said I'm clear. You can measure a city's health by how many of those calls end with laughter. We built a listening lab, one small room with 2 comfortable chairs and a schedule blocked for hour-long conversations. With frontline staff. No agenda, no minutes. A promise. Nothing you say here will become a weapon. We kept that promise, and the rumor extinguished itself by month 2. It's safe. They don't interrupt. Ideas bred there became policy in the wild, like quiet hour in waiting rooms, on-shift snack credits, so no one had to choose between hunger and a break. And clear path signs, yellow floor decals that literally map the fastest way through a maze of forms. The old CFO, skeptical, precise, surprised me. He started showing up at clinics unannounced and sitting in the lobby with a notebook, not to inspect but to learn. He drew a flowchart of our check-in process with arrows that looked like bad spaghetti and labeled it, "Why It Feels Hard." 3 weeks later, he sponsored the redesign. I thought charity wasn't strategy, I teased. He rolled his eyes. Turns out strategy was starving for charity. Ethan and I were invited to a small auditorium with good microphones and seats that punished posture. Students in hoodies, managers with pens. A grandmother with a notebook she kept calling her degree. They wanted a fairy tale, the prince who looks at a pauper and sees a queen. I told them we didn't need royalty. We needed room. Room to be human and still important. Room to be poor and still seen. Room to make money without treating compassion like a cost center. A hand went up. What about shareholders? Ethan said, shareholders are people. People care about more than price to earnings when they go home at night. Another hand. What about speed? I said. Speed is only useful if you're headed somewhere worth arriving. They asked if we were in love. The internet always wants the easy answer because easy travels fast. I said, I am in love with the way he listens. He said, I am in love with the way she tells the truth. The room exhaled like a door opening. Later, when the lights went down, he placed a small box on the table between us. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't loud. Inside was a thin silver ring, one word engraved inside. Freedom. Freedom to walk, he said. Freedom to stay. I will never buy your time. I will ask to share your life. Grief had made room. Love moved in with its suitcase of mourning. I laughed and cried in the same breath. Yes, I said. Not because I owe you, because we owe the world a life that keeps its promises. We went back to the bridge where the water talks like an old friend. He held the umbrella wide. A bus hissed by, full of faces that looked like tomorrow. Somewhere a siren chose not to wail. The kind of quiet that means the story can breathe. In the months that followed, the work kept teaching us. Luce asked to train 2 younger translators, cousins who carried notebooks like passports. She built a glossary of dignity, phrases in 3 languages that avoid blame and increase clarity. What help would make this easier? Instead of "Why are you late?" HR adopted the glossary, and for the first time, I saw a corporate handbook with a heartbeat. Dow pitched night market health, pop-up clinics behind factories with fairy lights and soup. We tried one. 200 people showed up with questions wrapped in shyness. We answered what we could and wrote what we couldn't on a whiteboard titled Homework. We returned the next week with the answers and second helpings of soup. Attendance doubled. We kept the homework board. Armand sent a voice note after a cyclone. If we wire money, it buys little. If we wire chargers and solar lanterns, it buys time. We shipped both. He coordinated distribution by WhatsApp tree, and the photos came back. Lights like small stars. Faces like dawn. Inside Northbridge, we piloted do-over days, a monthly slot where anyone could fix a mistake without discipline if they wrote a short note on what they learned and one change they propose. Uptake was hesitant, then enthusiastic. Someone wrote, I mislabeled a shipment. I learned to ask for a second set of eyes. Can we print a checklist and put it on the pallet wrap? We did. Mislabels dropped by half. Confidence doubled. We also learned to celebrate quiet wins. A janitor asked for a stool for a coworker's bad knee. The supervisor bought 2 and placed 1 at the front desk. A developer moved the error message so it appeared before users filled the form. A nurse taped a smiley face on the blood pressure cart for children and discovered grown-ups relaxed too. None of it would trend. All of it made the day feel fair. On Sundays, I would sit at the bench with my mother's plaque and watch the clinic breathe. A father tying a shoelace while his toddler recited planets out of order. An elderly woman counting her pills, then counting them again with a volunteer who didn't rush. A teenager closing her eyes as a translator turned fear into sentences, and sentences into choices. Sometimes Ethan joined me with the old wallet. He never replaced it. Some things work better after being found. Inside is still the bus transfer, the gum receipt, the photo of the sister who taught him to keep the umbrella wide, and that sentence he wrote to himself years ago. Don't let scale steal your soul. When people ask him for the secret to scale, he says, Attention is the scarcest resource. Spend it where it multiplies. Then he does the thing that makes the line true. He listens. We still argue. About cadence, about commas, about whether cereal is a soup. We apologize faster now. We say, "You're right. You're safe. I'm here." Like vitamins. Sometimes people tell the story like I returned a wallet and received a fortune. That's not true. I returned a wallet and received a purpose. He lost a little image and found a heart. The secret inside the wallet wasn't a receipt or a photograph. It was a sentence. You are not finished yet. It belonged to him. It belonged to me. It belongs to anyone who has ever believed that mercy might be measurable. If you are listening to this with a night around you that feels too large, hear me. You are not finished yet. Return the thing you could have kept. Keep the thing you thought you had to lose. And when the rain begins again, do not run from it. Let it write your name on the street. Let it wash the dust off your hope. Let it find your hands, carrying something back to where it belongs. Because wealth is only real when it is shared. Because love is only strong when it is free. Because justice is only justice when the quiet parts of the city can hear it and say, "Yes, that. More of that." My name is Lina Harper. I was homeless once. Now I am a keeper of doors. I open them. I teach others where the hinges are. If you find a wallet in the rain, you will know what to do. And if you ever wonder whether it matters, come sit on the bench with my mother's name and watch the city remember how to breathe. Watch a nurse tie a shoelace for a child braver than his fever. Watch a translator turn fear into sentences and sentences into choices. Watch a CEO wait in line like everyone else, because everyone else is the point. And when you leave, take this with you. You are not finished yet.